We're getting rolling on the Krueger Show on a Friday night after Warrior basketball during the NCAA tournament. Man, if you had Purdue winning the NCAA tournament, they're out. Fairleigh Dickinson knocked them out. And we're talking Niners, of course, because we got Jordan Elliot in the house from Niners Nation. Jordan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Larry. Yeah, it's been quite a hectic week. Feels like a lot happened the last few days, so it seems like the time's gone by pretty quick.
Well, I wanted to get in, and I entitled this, what is the 49ers or the 49ers' next big move? Do the 49ers have a big move left, or have we seen all of the big moves?
At this point, I think we've seen the big moves. Like if you start looking at the roster right now, most of the starting spots on paper, when you start drawing it out, look like they're essentially spoken for. One move that, it's probably very far-fetched, but there's one move that after today, I've been spending the day thinking about. I don't know if you saw the report that apparently Tennessee approached Kevin Byard about taking a pay cut. He's one of the best safeties in the league, so it's no surprise he didn't want to take one. Financially, he has a massive cap hit this year, and I don't know what the logistics would be, if the 49ers were to pursue a guy like that. When you start looking at the defense, Deshaun Gibson was great for them last year, but he's also on the other side of 30. How much longer are you going to have that security at that position? A guy like Kevin Byard would really put this defense over the top. I already think on paper they're one of, if not the best defenses in the NFL. But if you put a guy like Byard next to Hufanga after the All-Pro season that he just had, you're able to get him and Gibson and Hufanga on the field at the same time. This defense would be incredible. Naturally we're going to draw the connection with Rand Carthen there now. There's at least some familiarity. If it does get to a point where they start fielding offers, there's at least that, connection with him in the 49ers. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm not going to lie there. I've been thinking about that all day. I'm like, man, if there's one piece they could really get to take this defense over the top, I think it's an elite safety, and I think Byard's been one of the best in the entire NFL. So that's one that I'm just kind of, keeping in the back of my mind, kind of, monitoring from a distance and seeing what happens there. But I think other than that, no, I don't think there's like a huge move left to be made. It's just going to be depth signings for the most part.
Let's talk about Byard. He had 69 tackles this year, 4 interceptions, defended 4 passes. Does Tennessee play a lot of zone or a lot of man? I mean, he was their free safety opposite Amani Hooker, who started at strong.
He can do everything. He to me is just he's one of the just elite players at the position, and it feels like the market for the position is really weird. Like I don't know what the details are, but it seems like teams are reluctant to pay a guy like Gardner Johnson right now, who's a really good safety in his prime. We saw Harrison Smith restructure, even though he's a bit older. So I don't know if the league is just a little hesitant to, shell out money for good safeties right now, but maybe this is the time to get one. And, I believe he's 29 going into age 30. So feasibly, there's still a few good years left where he's really playing at a high level. He was the first team All-Pro in 2021, I believe. And I remember very specifically that game the Niners played in Tennessee on Christmas Eve in 2021. He was tremendous. He made it very difficult for the 49ers to get Kittle open, and just having a guy like that can erase other teams' big slots, tight ends, is something that I think would really help this 49ers defense out a lot.
There's no question. And the story coming out of Nashville on ESPN is that as you stated, they approached Byard about taking a pay cut. He doesn't want to take it, and he doesn't believe his play warrants any kind of a decrease in salary. He's probably right. He's been an incredible player. He just signed a 5-year extension worth $70.5 million with $31 million guaranteed as recently as 2019. As he's a 2-time first team All-Pro. He's got a $19.6 million cap number this year. If the Titans were to release him, they'd save around $6 million in cap space, but retain $13.6 million in dead cap space. How does that change if they decide to trade him? He has been the captain. The players voted him the team captain now 4 straight years. If they trade him, is the cap hit different?
I honestly haven't checked, but I can check really quickly. That's something that I honestly probably should have had a better definitive number for before bringing it up. But like with stuff like that, the way I always look at it, Larry, is for the most part, like they can work that stuff out, the financial stuff. And if a team's approaching a guy about a pay cut, usually that means that they feel strongly enough that if they're not willing to take it, they will explore a trade or explore a release. It's saying, let me see, it's trade pre-June 1st. It's saying about the same. If they trade him before June 1st, it would be a $13 million dead cap, $5.9 million in cap savings. If they trade him after June 1st, there's only $5 million in dead money and $14 million in cap savings. So I don't know if that's something they could like designate as a post June 1st, but there definitely is an avenue for them saving some money if they were to trade him.
Very interesting. He was born in Philadelphia. He's 29, but he went to high school in Atlanta, Georgia, and then went to Middle Tennessee. So he's been in the state of Tennessee really since high school, and he's openly stated that he would love to retire as a Titan and stay as a Titan. But very interesting. What do you think it would take? If you had to guess.
Probably a day 2 pick at this point. I mean, he's still a really good player. It's expensive, but I think at this point, you could get a guy like that for probably the future second or third. And for a player like that, I would be at least having the conversations if I'm John Lynch and Adam Peters in that front office, because that's one area where, as great as Hufanga has been, he can't play both safety positions. And again, Gibson was fantastic, but how many more years can you count on that given his age and the way things are trending? Safety is a position where they don't really have a player right now on the roster that you're looking at where you're like, okay, this is the guy clearly going forward. Taylor Hawkins is a guy maybe they really like that's been on the practice squad. It showed some flashes during the preseason, but I don't think we've seen enough for them to, feel like that's the set in stone safety heir apparent. So just given the fact that, it could end up being a hole on an otherwise really strong defense in the near future, I think you at least have to explore the potential of making a move for a guy like that.
Yeah, I don't watch tons of Titan ball, but I was watching Dallas late in the year because I wanted to see, it really looked like Niners were going to get Dallas in this playoff run, and I just wanted to take a look at the Cowboys, and so I caught them against the Titans late in the year, and Byard was everywhere. I think he had 2 picks. He was flying around. He was making plays. He's a tremendous football player, that's for sure. The Niners are definitely in that stage right now where they are a Super Bowl contender. They are in their window. If they were going to extend, now would be the opportune time to extend. And that's definitely, if you said, where on this football team do they need a difference maker? It's probably in the secondary. I mean, it's a very, very young secondary. Outside of Tayshaun Gibson, when you look at the players that are there and, what the draft ahead, I think it's very likely that the 49ers are going to have, in their DB room, they're going to have 5 guys that are like under 24. Mm-hmm. That's a very young room.
Absolutely. And I think that, there's a good balance that you could have of that youth and that athleticism. I thought K'Wan Williams, for example, he was fantastic during his time with the Niners, but as anybody else who plays the sport does, you could see the years kind of catching up and that speed diminishing a bit. And so when you put out a guy like Samuel Womack a little bit, while there is the learning curve and the growth that comes with being a young player, just seeing his long speed and his ability to run in the open field, I do think there are a lot of benefits to having the young secondary. You just can't have too young of a secondary. And I think finding that balance by bringing in a guy like Byard, who has the pedigree that he has the all-pro accolades to his name, would really help round out what could be a really strong group on paper. Steve Wilkes has great history with the work that he's done with defensive backs, longtime defensive back coach in the league. So I think that's another area where we'll see kind of an added boost and maybe a little bit of an emphasis with the back end that we haven't seen the last 6 years or so in San Francisco with Saleh and D'Amico as the defensive coordinators.
What position group do you think has gotten worse since the Eagle game? If I said to you, where are the Niners worse than they were when they played the Eagles in Philly? What area of the field would you point to?
I would immediately point to the defensive end spot. I really like Samson Ebukam. I thought what they did with him in the 2 years he was here, basically he picked up and started playing a new position that he hadn't played in the NFL with his previous stint with the Rams. And I thought he turned into a really good player. And I think the Colts paying him what they did signifies how much the league valued him as well. And then Charles Omenihu, was a guy I loved writing about Charles Menahue when he was here, because he just did so many things that maybe wouldn't get, wouldn't show up in a box score, or you wouldn't catch I wouldn't catch the first time until I went back and would watch the film the week following a game. His ability to play inside, rush off the edge, that scissor swipe he had was just absolutely lethal this year. Losing a couple guys like that really hurts. I'm kind of holding out hope they bring back a guy like Jordan Willis, because I think he has a lot of value as a rotational guy. But as of now, he's not on the roster. So you lose 3 guys who've made really significant contributions to your team, not only in the regular season, but also have had big moments in the playoffs as well. Menahue had that great game in Dallas. He had the strip against the Seahawks. Willis will forever be in 49ers lore because of that block punt in Green Bay. So I think just not having those guys right now, even though the 49ers have shown they can replace that position, as of now, that would be the first area I'd point to and say, yeah, they definitely got weaker there.
All right, we're getting things rolling on the Pig in a Pickle Krueger show with Jordan Elliot from Niners Nation, and we should tell people we are sponsored by our title sponsor, Pig in a Pickle. Check them out in Corte Madera. They're at 341 Corte Madera Town Center in Marin County. They're open from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week, and they're also in Emeryville, open Wednesday through Sunday in the Emeryville Public Marketplace. The brisket, the pulled pork, it's all outstanding. The brisket chili is amazing. Hit Pig in a Pickle. And say hi to Damon and say hi to Mary and tell them that you're a proud supporter of the Krueger show and appreciate them being the title sponsor of the show. All right, let's get into it a little bit. You actually have an interesting article up right now on Niners Nation. And basically you're saying that the Ty McGill re-signing is the most underrated move of the 49ers offseason. Go ahead. Lay that out for us. How do you see Ty McGill, who a lot of people had never even heard of, and even some hardcore Niner fans really couldn't, they could walk right by him outside the stadium, outside of his uniform. They wouldn't recognize him. But I see him as valuable as well. But give me your theory on why re-signing him was the most underrated move.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to my just philosophy when you look at great teams in any sport. You have to have the glue guys, the depth guys, the guys that maybe don't get the flash, that aren't going to, draw big headlines when there is news involving them, whether it's a signing or something in season, but who are consistent, reliable pieces you can count on. And especially in a sport like football, where injuries and the wear and tear of a season is something that you have to account for every year. And I really liked last year the way that McGill stepped up when the 49ers defensive line was so depleted, especially on the interior. Armstead missed a number of games. Hassan Ridgeway missed some games. Kevin Givens missed some games. Kidlaw missed some games. And McGill stepped right in after they signed him off, signed him midseason, and he was immediately flashing, making plays. He had been with 9 different teams before he had signed with the 49ers last year. So he has this kind of cool story where he's made the journey around the league. He's made a ton of stops, had the cup of coffee all over the place. But to me, he has that really good blend of size and get off. And I think that when you have that get off, you're going to fit in great with that aggressive, pedal to the floor mentality that Chris Krueger and that defensive line group have. And you could see the way that he progressed as the season went on. Really slippery, good at shedding blocks, but just that burst that he had when he was lined up as a 3-tech, a 2-eye, being able to generate pressure in the backfield. The thing that really stood out to me, though, was his run defense, and I actually included in my article if anybody wants to check it out. PFF has a great stat called stops, which they use to constitute failure for an offensive play. And there's a more expanded definition in there, but it's a really good tool to weigh the value of a given tackle, right? Because if you stop a guy for a 1-yard gain, it's going to count the same as if you tackle a guy after a 15-yard gain where the other team picks up a first down, if you're looking at a traditional box score. But with stops, it does a really good job of highlighting these tackles that are made that create down and distance situations for opposing offenses. So McGill had 89 run defense snaps last year, which is a smaller sample size. There's a big rotation. He didn't join until the middle of the year. So the volume isn't big, but he had a stop on 10% of those run defense snaps that he had, which is an extremely efficient rate, especially when you're looking at a guy who's the 3rd or 4th defensive tackle in your rotation. So to round it out, I thought he was a really good player. I thought he flashed. He had a lot of potential. And what it also does is it allows the group as a whole to maintain the longevity they're going to need during that 17-game season and the subsequent playoff run you hope to be on. And when you can look at this team and Ty McGill with the flashes he showed as your fourth, maybe even fifth option on the interior, I think that that's just it's a sign of how strong this roster is. And it's a sign that this team has that that kind of same philosophy where they know that bringing in a guy like that, because they gave him, I don't know what the details are, but they gave him guaranteed money in the base salary.
I saw that,
so
yeah.
I think that, it doesn't define or, doesn't definitively mean that he's going to have a spot on the roster, but that means they feel pretty good about his chances of coming. They're not just going to hand out guaranteed money to a guy strictly to be a camp body in my eyes. So I think it just really comes down to the fact that he provides so much as a player who can be that third, fourth, fifth option, and then has shown when they need him to step up and play starter snaps, which he did during a couple games last year, he can be that guy too. So I just think it's one of those things where you bring in a guy like Hargrave, you bring in a former first-round pick in Cleveland Farrell, Sam Darnold, all these bigger moves are going to attract a lot of attention, but getting the glue guy like McGill to come back and build on the progress he was making last year has the potential to be, a really impactful move next season, which is why I felt it was so underrated.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to him a bunch this year because he's a great interview as well. And, every time I kind of inquired as to why this was a good fit for him, he just always talked about the Niners culture. And, the one thing about, once you've been in other spots, that, the difference between a winning culture and a losing culture. And this guy's like, yeah, it's how hard guys play. It's how committed they are to their craft. It's interesting too, when you think of great teams, it seems like you can't have a great team in the NFL unless you have a position or two where your position coach is so good, not just at coaching up players, but in finding lesser players that he can win with. I mean, Bob McKittrick did it for years. I think Harris Barton in the Niner 20-year run in the 80s and 90s, I believe, was the only, like Harris Barton and maybe Bubba Paris might have been the only first-round draft choices on the offensive line. Bob McKittrick consistently did it with undrafted free agents, late-round guys that other teams in the league didn't even care about. Same with Ray Rhodes. I mean, Ray Rhodes found Don Griffin. He's the one who found Tim McKyer. They had some great defensive backfield coaches. Now, I feel like it's Kosaric. I mean, he's just, whether it be Kerry Hyder or a Ty McGill, he's got guys that fit his system that he can get something out of that other people don't seem like they can. Arden Key looked good in this system. Mo Hurst looked good in this system. We've seen the best of Ty McGill. I definitely think that Hyder is just like, a guy that Chris trusts and, completely. And so to me, it seems like Chris is a real valuable asset for the 49ers. Not only does he have that wide nine scheme and he coaches it up and he coaches with tremendous energy and gets a lot out of his players. And it seems like there's not a guy on their D line that doesn't have a high revving motor, but he also can kind of find or at least recommend some low cost guys who have stepped in and plugged holes and played well. That's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, immensely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think it was reported he got a pretty sizable pay bump and he deserves, I don't know what the details are, but he deserves every single penny of whatever's coming his way, because there is just a different tone that these guys have when you hear them talk about it. And it's not even just 49ers players. Like I remember at the Combine last year, I was pretty confident the Niners were going to take an edge guy. They took Drake Jackson, obviously, with their first pick in the second round. And I spent a ton of time talking with these, outside linebackers, defensive ends, and the way their tones change, because you're in a scrum of people from a ton of different media markets asking questions about various teams. And when you asked about their meetings with the 49ers and Chris Kosaric, you could literally see a tangible shift in their attitude. They'd perk up, their faces would light up. So even in that brief encounter, the 10, 15 minutes he's getting with these guys for the first time, he's able to resonate with them. And that's something I think he's always had. One of the coolest experiences I had when I was there, not this past, month ago or whatever, but the year before last year, was I got to talk to John Randall for like 30 minutes. And I didn't realize that he and Chris Kosaric used to be teammates. And he talked about how Chris has always had this energy and this drive, just something special about him that people would buy into and feed off of. So I agree with you 100%, Larry. I think that, while the X's and O's and the schematic stuff is important, I think that Chris Kosarek's ability to relate to these guys and get them to want to run through a wall for him is worth its weight in gold. And the 49ers are going to be in a great spot as long as he's around.
One thing I really like, and I tweeted about it this week, is that I really like right now where the Niners are in the way they attack free agency. They handpick a guy. Last year it was Charvarius Ward. This year, Javon Hargrave. A top-tier free agent that they think is going to add a whole new element to their team. And they don't hold back. They pay that guy top dollar. Then they let the vast majority of their own guys just walk in free agency. They rarely sign any of them. Then they hunt at this point, after the initial free agent signings come down, for the guys that don't, register or aren't part of the draft compensatory equation. So they still wind up signing other free agents, just not guys that impact their compensatory picks. Then last year they produced 7 compensatory picks. This year they may be headed towards a similar number. They've got all these compensatory picks, and it gives them a lot of bites of the apple, especially on day 3 of the draft. And I just think that, I'm looking at the Rams. The Rams won the Super Bowl, but now they're in cap hell. They've traded Ramsey. They're shopping Stafford. There's talk that Aaron Donald's going. And then I look at some of these other teams. Phillies had to tear it down. They've lost a lot of talent since in this free agent period. Kansas City. It's like, I just feel like the Niners approach on the cap and to free agency, even though despite the fact they've yet to win a Super Bowl, I think the one thing that's undeniable is they've had among the NFL's deepest rosters almost each and every season, going back to the last 5 or 6. I really love their approach. What do you think? I mean, they seem very disciplined in, which free agents they want to pursue, which free agents they want to let go. They're aggressive at the start of free agency. Then they're very cognizant of the whole compensatory formula. I just think it's working right now. I like their formula, and I think they're showing a lot of discipline, and they're not falling in love with good players and paying them as great players, whether they be great players or good players elsewhere or good players in house. They're letting those guys walk elsewhere for bigger dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it comes down to you shell out the money for the guys you think really could be elite, as you mentioned, Javon Hargrave, which I haven't had as much fun watching, another team's player for, that the Niners acquired, I think, ever since Kyle and John have been there. I spent the last week watching hours and hours of this guy. That signing is going to be that's when we're going to look back on, and it could be the difference of them being a championship team or not. A guy like, Mooney Ward, who came in and immediately showed flashes of being that number 1 corner that they really haven't had in a generation. It felt like a guy that really could travel. Richard Sherman was fantastic. I don't want to take anything away from him. It's just different when you're getting a guy in the prime of their career versus where he was at when he signed with the team. And I think they've done a really good job, as you mentioned, of identifying that there's this kind of middle class of players that are going to get overpaid, that were not good enough to get tagged or extended by their own team necessarily, but also will command a market with lesser teams that don't have the luxury of passing on players like that. And I think the 49ers have done a good job of avoiding paying that tax for players who are only slightly above average and have gotten by trusting their own process. As you said, stacking these comp picks. I don't know if you saw, I did write an article earlier this week, or I think it was last week, maybe it was Friday last week. That was a history of where all these comp picks the Niners have turned into. They used one of the comp picks they got for Aaron Lynch, packaged it with Dakota Watson, got Dre Greenlaw with it, who's obviously been a huge part of the team. The comp pick that they got, I forget the player it was, but they had a comp pick they got for 2021. I think it was Emmanuel Sanders. I apologize for not remembering exactly. I think it was Emmanuel Sanders. That's who they drafted Talanoa Hufanga with, that comp pick they got in the 5th round. So they have a tangible process with what they've been doing, and it's really hard to argue the results. And I understand that, especially when it's March and the news cycle is kind of slow and we're so far from football, you want to see these big splash signings. You don't want to see your team banking on just consistently hitting 3rd, 4th, 5th rounders. But whether it's Adam Peters, John Lynch, Tariq Ahmad, whoever is behind this just insane run they've had hitting guys on day 3, it's kind of hard to fault them until they start like losing that success, right? So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think they've just done a really good job of paying big money for big time players, avoiding the kind of slightly above average guys, and then just again banking on their own process to continue to replenish their roster with cheap players on rookie deals that they can draft and develop within their own system.
And it's like, hey, I'll be critical of Parag and John and Kyle if I feel like it's necessary. But when I feel like they need to be kind of cheered and applauded, I'm no problem throwing applause their way. And I think they really deserve it. I really do. I think they've done an amazing job with free agency, and free agency is not easy. Glass half full guy says, I like Byard, but what would it take to get him? We kind of already talked about that. Probably Jordan thinks maybe a day 2 pick. That's going to be a very interesting story to watch in the days ahead for sure. Roberto says, great show, Krug. Which one of the leftover edge rushers would you like to see the Niners pick up opposite Bosa? I like Leonard Floyd. I like Leonard Floyd for a lot of reasons. I think he's got a young body, even though he's a little bit older than some of the guys. I like what he did with the Rams. And I think he, opposite Bosa, on a line that has Armstead and Hargrave, I'm not even joking. I would not be shocked if Leonard Floyd led the Niners in sacks because he's such a force, and playing with that many good players who are going to be doubled, he's going to get a lot of singles. And I think he can win off the edge. So that would be my guy. Is there an edge piece? People have suggested Yannick Ngakoue. We talked about that earlier today with Matt Barrows. Ngakoue is so productive that I just think that he's probably going to get paid even more, and it may exceed their what their budget is. But is there an edge piece in the draft or in the free agent market? There's a lot in the draft, but is there an edge rusher in the free agent market that you think you would like to see them go after?
There's a couple guys. I'll be honest. Like, I watched a ton of Ngakoue just to kind of see what he had looked like, because I really liked him in Jacksonville. I thought he was a guy that he was really good with his hands, and I thought that's something that it's not like he was so overly reliant on speed or his athleticism was really good, but he had something that I thought would age well. And I think he's 27. But I was curious as to why he had kind of been bouncing around. He's in Minnesota, and then he's on the Raiders, now with the Colts. And I'll be honest, I think he's a good player, but I think he kind of fits into that market where the 49ers won't be willing to pay, as you mentioned. Like, I think he'll make a team that is desperate for edge help better, but is he worth the cap maneuvering the 49ers are going to have to work around to sign a guy like that? I don't think so. And again, that's not a knock on him as a player. I just don't think it aligns with what the 49ers are looking to do. And I think the 49ers really believe in Drake Jackson. I think their biggest thing with Drake Jackson is just getting his body ready, bulking him up a little bit. And he has the bend that's really hard to teach guys. You either have it or you don't. He has a deep bag of moves that he's shown on tape he can go to as a pass rusher. I just think he came in a little bit undersized for the NFL game, and I think we saw that rear its head over the course of the full season. But I think the 49ers' belief in Drake Jackson is going to prevent them from making a move for a guy like Yannick. I'll be honest, a guy I really do like is Marcus Golden. I've always liked Marcus Golden as a guy that can be a speed rusher off the edge. We've seen what happens when you pair a good speed rusher on the other side of Nick Bosa, when you get him out in that wide 9 spot. I don't think he would be an every down guy by any means, but he definitely could be a guy you could roll out there on third downs. And I think the 49ers are at a spot now where if you're not getting the offers that you want, you go spend a year in San Francisco, you have a chance to win. You're around that culture, as you mentioned, that so many guys like. And your market's probably going to be better the next year because you're going to be able to put some stuff on tape that teams are going to be watching. I don't know if you saw during Javon Hargrave's introductory press conference, but he was like, yeah, we watched a ton of 49ers defensive line stuff. And that was, they're arguably the best defensive line in the league, and they're watching the Niners stuff. So I really like him. And another guy, it's interesting. I'd have to do a little bit more of a deep dive because I'll be honest, I haven't watched him as much the last couple seasons. But Bud Dupree is another name that's pretty interesting. He's 30. I think he's still a guy who could contribute. But I think it would have to be that kind of specialized speed rusher off the edge, not necessarily a guy that you're banking to come in and be the day one starter. I think they're looking at that position opposite Bosa as a bit more of a committee approach. And I think the signing of Cleveland Farrell kind of gives them insurance as he may not be the guy that's going to, he's kind of in that same boat of Solomon Thomas, where he's always going to have the expectations with the Raiders to be the number 4 overall pick. Now he's with the 49ers, and he can be a guy that's a solid, reliable player you can roll out on base downs, really good against the run, and he's not going to have the pressure of people expecting him to be this double-digit sack guy because the team took him so high. So I really think that the way that they attacked getting a guy like Farrell in the building and with the things you hear about what they believe with Drake Jackson kind of indicates where they're going with that position.
Cleveland Farrell is he was the 4th pick in the draft based on collegiate production. He always played on a loaded Clemson line. He's really productive. He's good against the run. I think I like him as an interior rusher if they go to that 4D end alignment and put him inside, because I think he could stand up in there, and I think he can play the run. But I don't see anything close to a Menahue. I don't see anything close to Jordan Willis. I don't see anything close to to Ebukam as far as an edge bender. I see a guy who's got a great motor, and he's a little stronger than you'd think, and he's a little bit better against the run than the average defensive end. But I don't see special traits off the edge, and it worries me. To me, they still really need somebody with a lot of speed. Now, I love Golden. Golden did tear the ACL a couple years ago, but the motor is just crazy good. He's always got it revved high. He's played incredible ball against the Niners. He was the lower rated guy on his college team with Shane Ray, and he's outperformed Shane Ray. I don't think Shane Ray's even in the league anymore, and Marcus is still doing his thing. I like the idea of Marcus Golden. And there's a few others as well, but to me, they really need one edge rusher. And I'm surprised. I mean, I would not be surprised if agents for edge rushers were begging John Lynch to sign them, because why would you not want to be the 4th guy on this line? I mean, if you know anything about the way football is played and how O-lines block, you want to be the 4th guy on this Niners starting line, right? I mean, should be defensive ends fighting each other to get on a plane to come here to be opposite Bosa on a same line with Hargrave and Armstead. I'd be shocked if they couldn't get somebody at a very reasonable price who's pretty good.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think that you nailed it. I was thinking the exact same thing, where it's like, there's so many teams that are desperate for the edge help or desperate for help at one position. And the 49ers can kind of, kick back and throw their legs on the desk in that negotiating room and be like, what offer are you going to make me? Like they're in a very advantageous position because they have this formula. They have Kosaric, they have the track record, and it's like musical chairs, right? There's so many guys, and there's only going to be so many viable landing spots. And I'm looking at the list now. Like, there's so many other guys. Like, I wrote a couple of weeks ago about Justin Houston. He's another guy where if he doesn't end up somewhere, where a team's willing to pay him a ton, I think he makes a lot of sense. Even as he's progressing into his 30s, he looked great for the Ravens last season. Very technically sound. Still has plenty of athleticism. You don't have to worry about the age as much. Dante Fowler's another guy where maybe he gets into this system. Always had great athletic traits. You pair him with Kosaric in this defensive line group. So, yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I think that the 49ers feel the same way, which is why I wouldn't expect there to be a signing on the edge until the market maybe cools down a little bit. And you start having teams reaching out and saying, all right, what's it going to take to get our guy there? And the 49ers feel a little bit better when they are negotiating those deals.
Frank Clark, Barrow's brought up Frank Clark's name. I don't know if they like Frank Clark off the field, but man, I mean, Frank Clark's a player. Okay, MF says, the only bracket I care about is the Niners media bracket. All right, are you aware of the Niners media bracket?
Yeah, I saw it. Rob's a very creative mind, and it's very very on brand that he would put something together like that. Rob does fantastic work, so I wasn't surprised. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't expect to get very far myself.
Who are you up against?
I'm in
the play-in bracket.
No way! Oh man!
Yes.
I'm up against my buddy Andrew Pasquini, and it wouldn't surprise me if he pulled a little bit of that Furman magic or Princeton, one of those teams that won the past couple days.
Fairleigh Dickinson this afternoon against Purdue.
Yeah, not to say that I would be some high. I don't want to, I don't want that to come across the wrong way. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I had an early exit out of it. And I just think that there's a lot of potential for some great content from it. Which again, it's no surprise at all. Rob put that together. He makes great content, and I thought it was kind of funny when I first saw it, and I'm really interested to see how it progresses over the next 10 days or whatever it is.
MF says John Lund's on upset alert. Okay, so present company excluded. Take yourself out. Take myself out. Give me somebody who's a Niner content creator that you really, really enjoy. And I know you got a lot, right? Come on. You work with Kyle Posey, you work with tons of guys at Niners Nation. You've been on a bunch of shows. There's a bunch of established media people, old media people, new media people, bloggers, people who are locked on and everything else. But is there somebody that you're just like, you know what? I really enjoy. I mean, I have a lot of them on this channel. So I'm a big fan of many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know them all, though. It was an impressive list. And there was like 5 or 6 guys in there. I'm like, I have no idea who that is. And I got to kind of, research them. But is there somebody out there that you've either discovered in the last year or that you've followed for a while that you say, you know what? I'm going to give this guy a shout out. I think his stuff is superb.
It's really hard because there's so many. So I don't want to take anything away from anybody else or have anybody feel slighted. I think that the 49ers content scene and the amount of people that do content for the team, it's special. I have a lot of friends and people I work with that cover other teams, and they're in awe of how many people do podcasts, video, writing, blogging, whatever for the 49ers. I think the people on the beat are great as well. But I will say I just spent a full week in Indianapolis, and I got to work 24 hours a day next to Brad Graham. He does the SF Niners. Brad is fantastic, and I pride myself on my work ethic, right? I pour a lot of hours and time into the work that I do, and watching this guy work up close, it was just absolutely incredible. He has 3 phones out at the same time, Larry, doing graphics, updating news, getting live set up, doing YouTube, it blew my mind. Brad is fantastic. And then the other one who I think does incredible work and deserves more recognition is Steph Sanchez. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of
never met him.
She's fantastic.
I've never met her.
She does 49 Carats pod. She just did one actually a couple days ago with Stefania Bell from ESPN. Fantastic podcast. I definitely recommend checking that out. Steph, I worked with Steph on a blog together a couple of years ago. It was my first cross pass with her. She's just absolutely incredible. She does very good work, really good content, does podcasts, does video content, works her butt off. She's extremely, extremely dedicated to putting out consistent content. And I've seen, her channel grow as a result of it. So I think she definitely deserves a shout out. And, I don't want to spend 10 minutes doing it, but there's so many other people out there.
Sure.
Everybody who does 49ers content has my respect because this stuff is really hard and it's very difficult to carve your own lane in a crowded space where there's so many established people. And I think anybody who has the courage to kind of, take that leap and start a YouTube channel, start a podcast, start writing, they have my utmost respect because you never know where it's going to take you. And it's led me to meet some lifelong friends. I've met some really cool people. I'm here talking on a show with you because of this stuff. So I don't take it for granted. And I think anybody that does it is just fantastic in my book.
Yeah. No, I'm going to throw a vote for Matt Barrows just because I first of all, I enjoy his content. I think his humor is underrated. His credibility is unquestioned. And then also he, has a great way about him talking to the players. I've kind of, I've been standing right there when he's talking to some guys. He never insults them. He never, in any way antagonizes them, but he still gets there. He gets really good quotes. He sometimes gets content that other people don't get. I enjoy a lot of people, but I enjoy Matt Barrows quite a bit. This is an interesting thing. The longest tenured member of the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line is asking for a trade. Jonah Williams, the former Alabama offensive tackles, expressed his desire to be dealt. This is a source confirming to ESPN this news earlier today. And he's a 4-time Pro Bowl offensive tackle. What do you think? I mean, he's a left tackle. Would you try to extend in a trade? We'd already talked about Kevin Byard. Do you think, would you extend for a Jonah Williams just so that you could play him for 1 year, maybe at right tackle, and maybe have an in-house replacement for Trent Williams? I don't know. It's a tough call because I'm sure it would cost a lot to make a trade for Jonah Williams. And some people don't feel like he's the player that he was billed to be coming out of Alabama. What do you think? What do you think? Is Jonah Williams, is John Lynch making phone calls to Cincinnati, inquiring about the price tag that they want in return for Jonah Williams? Or do you think he's satisfied with McKivitz, Jalen Moore, looking at lower free agents and maybe draft choices to fill the right tackle spot?
I think he will absolutely make the call, and we'll hear that good old line about due diligence. I think they'll be in on every player and have their due diligence on every player. I do wonder logistically how much it does make sense. The only way I could see them really making an aggressive move like that is if they've had some internal dialogue with Trent Williams where he's like, hey, I'm back for this year, but I'm not making a big commitment beyond that. He did talk at the end of the season about how, it's a grueling year. The years are adding up. He's had a lot of wear and tear on his body. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer whenever he decides, to step away from the game. So if they do get some signals from Trent Williams that maybe their future at left tackle is up in the air beyond the season, then I think a move like that makes a little bit more sense, because I could see a scenario where if they did make a move for a guy like Jonah Williams, he would play right tackle in the interim, and then, you have that transition back to left tackle in the long run. I think we need to get to a point in the NFL, Larry, where we understand that it's such a pass-happy league now that tackles in general, in my eyes at least, should be compensated around the same. And I think that this discrepancy in what left tackles get paid versus right tackles is why you have guys requesting trades like this, why you have negotiations with a guy like Orlando Brown where they're pushing hard to play, left tackle. And I think that if these guys were compensated better, you wouldn't have this much of an issue having guys play on the right side or the left side, vice versa. And until that gets sorted out, I don't know that the 49ers are willing to take on the uncertainty of, if Williams does play for another 3 years, then do you have the same problem that Williams is having with the Bengals a year from now, in San Francisco, where he's like, hey, you know what? Like, I want to be paid like a left tackle. I want to play a left tackle. And you can't move a first ballot Hall of Famer off his spot. You can't move Trent Williams around. So sure. I would say no. I just think that the only way it does again make sense to me is if they are getting some sort of indication from Trent Williams that maybe it's time to start looking aggressively at a replacement after the season.
We're now getting into the draft portion of the off season, and I'm starting to do some deep dives on the players and doing some one-on-one stuff that I'm going to release it here in a week. That I'm really, this is what I really enjoy the most. I mean, this is, looking at the draft, because I find guys every day that I'm like, wow, this guy's going to be a steal. This guy's going to be a steal. I mean, I've got like 50 guys who are going to be steals on day 3 of the draft. And we're not even in April 1st yet. You just went to the combine though, and you had a chance to kind of put your eyes on the players, put your eyes on the workouts, talk to them, maybe even get a sense from being around some other Niner content creators who maybe, the whispers around the combine. What would you say? Is there any prospect at the combine that you have heard multiple connections to the Niners? Is there any prospect that you feel like you have a reasonable expectation based on your intel, based on your travel out there, based on, and everybody plays their cards close to the vest. So they're trying not to give these secrets away. But I'm asking you as somebody was there, and when you're there, you get a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of hear the whispers and hear what's being said off the record. I do have a list here of the players that they met with in Indy, and I'm going to throw it out to people. Alex Austin, defensive back, Oregon State. Jair Brown, defense safety from Penn State. I like him a lot. Niners Nation had that one. The Rice defensive end, Akena Anekchukwu. I know I butchered that. Jalen Graham, who's a stack backer, undersized stack backer from Purdue. Cam Jones, a linebacker from Indiana. Jarvarius Owens, safety from Houston. Isaiah McGuire, defensive end from Missouri. Zach Pickens, who I like a lot. He was a 5-star guy coming out of high school in South Carolina. He's a defensive tackle. Daniel Scott, Cal safety. J.L. Skinner, Boise State safety, who also had a serious injury leading up to the combine, tore his pec. Jamie Robinson from Florida State. Dante Still, who's a safety. Dante Still's defensive lineman from West Virginia. Tyreek Wilson, who's a nickel from Boise State, who's a real team leader. And then Byron Young had a very impressive workout. Tennessee Vols, defensive end, edge rusher. Whether it be part of the list that I just threw out or just somebody that you heard on your own, what do you think? Based on your trip to Indy, if you were going to take 2 or 3 guys and say those guys are absolutely on a collision course for the 49ers draft room, what do you think?
I think Isaiah McGuire makes a ton of sense. The problem is that they met with so many guys, a few that you listed, where unless they're going to be aggressive and trade up, I don't know how they're going to end up falling to where the Niners are ultimately going to be picking. But I'll be honest, last year there was a lot more connection to some of these guys. Like I did extensive stuff with Drake Jackson and Spencer Burford because I had heard some stuff that, there was some interest there and ended up panning out. Luckily I didn't waste, too much. That ended up not being a waste of time, going and getting that content for that. This year, it wasn't the same, to be honest, Larry. I didn't really hear too much in terms of draft stuff. I did hear some stuff during free agency. I had it on pretty good authority. They'd like Sam Darnold for a while. So that was one it was good to see that was there was some validity to that. But draft guys, I think like Isaiah McGuire makes a ton of sense because of the familiarity with Steve Wilkes. I think he's a guy that's going to be there when they feasibly will be picking, unless they do move up, move down, whatever they do with those 3 comp picks at the end of the 3rd round. I wish I could give you something more concrete, but there isn't really a player or two that I had heard like, man, they really like this guy. They're all over this guy. There are a couple tackles that I've heard they like. I heard they really like the tackle from Syracuse, but again, I think he's a guy that he might be a late day 1, early day 2 guy. So I don't know how, they could like him all they want. I don't know how realistic it is that they get him. For whatever my input's worth, I hope they end up with Jamie Robinson. Jamie Robinson was the guy. He was probably my favorite guy from the combine that I had the chance to speak with, interact with. And I think he's a guy that makes a ton of sense for them. And J.L. Skinner's another guy too, where I really like his athletic ability. I've seen some people project him more as like a box safety, but I think he could do more than that. I hate taking what guys did in college and using that to project what they'll do at the next level. I'd much rather bank on the athletic traits and the ability to project what they can do rather than what they've already done. So I really like J.L. Skinner. He's a guy that I really like.
6'4" safety.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's a guy that he just again like that kind of size, that athleticism is hard to bank on. Hard to not want to bank on and bet on yourself. He makes a ton of sense. Another guy who I really like, and Brad Graham was the guy who showed me it and has been all over it, is Saldiveri, the right tackle from Old Dominion. Which is a smaller school. He might be a later pick, but man,
he likes him.
The little bit of tape I saw, he looks really good, Larry. He looks really technically sound. Some of the things he's doing, and people will bring up competition and this and that, but it wasn't something where it was like, okay, he's just like, bowling over guys and standing them up. It was very technically sound what he was doing, hand placement, pad level, things that translate well regardless of what your level of competition is. So he's a guy who I think would make a ton of sense for them, and he's definitely athletic enough to get out in space. And then I know Brad's been all over Blake Freeland. I think he plays right tackle, maybe left tackle, a tackle from BYU. I admittedly have
6'8".
Yeah, he's got great athletic traits. But yeah, there's not really a guy this year that I'm looking at where I'm like, this makes a ton of sense for them. And the thing that's getting me, Larry, is that effectively the top 100 prospects as of now are kind of more or less out the window because of where they're slated to pick. And I don't know how aggressive they're going to be in a move up. One guy, I don't know if you've watched, but a buddy of mine whose opinion I value greatly, really smart guy, told me to take a closer look at Derek Hall, the edge out of Auburn. And I love him. Really like what I see out of him. Again,
reminds me a lot of D Ford. Reminds me a lot of D Ford. Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have to move up if they want a guy like that. But hey, maybe they feel comfortable with the amount of picks they have and the comp picks they'll be getting next year too, where you can be aggressive getting a guy like that. And some of the things he showed on tape, like he looks like he could be an every down edge. Like he could set the edge. He was great against the run, looked really good at the Senior Bowl. So there's a lot of guys that I really like. I just can't say confidently I've heard the Niners like them too. I wish I could give you more in that department.
The guy I want you to watch, and I don't like giving homework assignments, but I know you like to watch these guys anyway.
Yeah.
But go watch Alex Palszewski, the big right tackle for Illinois. He wears 63. He's a senior. He's from Mount Prospect, Illinois. He's a team captain. He was a really good pass protector. He played right guard and right tackle. He's played like 65 starts because they granted him an extra year of eligibility. The guy is tough. His family, came from immigrated from Poland. He's just a tough guy. He listed Ivan Drago as his favorite athlete. He goes, even though he's a fictional character, I like him because he would never talk. He would just let his work do the talking for him. But this kid's graduated. He's got a degree in kinesiology. He's smart. He's tough. He's played in the Big Ten. He's a captain. He's got a wrestling background, which I love. He doesn't miss games. He's probably going to be a day 3 pick. But I'm interested to see what you have to say about Palszewski if you watch him.
I'll get to it. This is turning. I want to get done with the free agency stuff. I appreciate it. I love the news cycle we're in now, but I'm right there with you. I want to be able to just pivot totally towards some of these guys, and it's great because so much of the focus is on the top 50, 75 picks, and you kind of get the chance to get a little bit deeper with these 5th, 6th round picks that other teams right now really don't care about because their team actually has a 1st and 2nd round pick. So it's kind of nice that, the 49ers kind of have that market to themselves right now of, getting the content out on some of these guys. So it means that there is more homework to do, but there's not a ton of priors out there to confirm. Like, it's not like you're seeing somebody else's opinion where like some of these guys I've been hearing about for 3 years, and it's really hard to kind of silence the outside opinions and go in and watch a guy you've been hearing about for 3 years. Whereas a guy like I've never watched that guy play. So I feel like you can go in with a little bit more of an unbiased angle watching somebody like that.
Interesting chat for here from Tyler. He says, have you guys seen, and he lists a bunch of guys, but the guy I want to ask you about is the first guy, Will McDonald, the Iowa State defensive end. Are the Niners, what are they looking for in an edge rusher in this wide 9? Are they looking for somebody 240 like McDonald, 245? He's crazy athletic. I mean, this guy could probably dunk a basketball. He's got movement ability and spin moves. And I mean, this guy's like one of the freakiest athletes off the edge, but he's 240, 245. Are they looking for, an Alden Smith type? Somebody's 270, 275. In an ideal world, if Chris were here, Chris Kocherik and Wilkes, or like last year, D'Amico, or even Kyle or John, if they were here and paint us a picture of your ideal 4-3, wide 9 defensive end, are they happy with multiple body types, or are they looking for the guy 270? Because it seems like they've gone for some bigger guys.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly what it is. I think their ideal guy is 6'4", 6'5", 265, 270, 34 and a half, 35-inch arms. Like they're going to, in my eyes, prioritize the guys like that. D Ford was such a special player, and it's really a bummer, Larry, because I feel like so much of what he did gets overlooked just because the injuries unfortunately derailed his time here. But what he was able to do, he was, I think, like 245 around that when he was with the 49ers, but he had so much power, and he was able to convert that speed into power. And that's what I think the 49ers are really looking for. And I have to watch a little bit more, but just like from what I've seen from McDonald, I don't think he necessarily has that power from the speed that the Niners typically look for. He's a tremendous athlete, and I agree. His bend is unreal. His ability to run the hoop, the way he just looked naturally bending, turning the corner, he looked fantastic. But the Niners, to me, that's why I think like when they got a guy like a Willis, or they got a guy like a Menahue, these bigger athletes that really have the ability to convert that speed into power with their rush, can really land a punch on an opposing tackle and do more than just win with speed on the edge. If you can do that too, it's great. I mean, Obviously, they're not going to be complaining if they get a guy that does both, but I think at this point they're honestly prioritizing the power over the speed based on some of the recent signings they've made and the people that they've looked at in the draft.
Do you expect Kinlaw to be dealt?
I don't. It's so funny. I was watching the Bears game back earlier this afternoon for a totally unrelated reason, and the very first play of that game, Kinlaw destroys the left guard, gets in the backfield. Justin Fields ends up missing a receiver terribly because Kinlaw, pressured him on the first play of the season, first snap of the game. And I'm at the point where it's like, without the medical, information and what they're seeing, with x-rays or MRIs or whatever the specifics are of his injuries and, his recovery from that ACL, like I still see the talent. And that's what I keep getting hung up on. And I think the 49ers might be in the same boat where the couple million they'd save and cutting him or trading him isn't worth throwing in the towel quite yet. This is year 4. I don't expect them to pick up his 5th-year option. I think they're going to give it one more go this season. And again, that's where a guy like Ty McGill coming in, having the depth they have, getting a guy like Javon Hargrave to add to that already loaded group maybe makes things easier for Kinlaw. But I just keep coming back to the potential area. Like I understand that it hasn't lived up to expectations and the injuries have cost so much time, but there are still these flashes on tape where it's like, man, this guy is a handful for anybody when he's rushing from that 3-tech spot. And maybe they can carve a role for him moving forward where, he isn't going to be this, all pro level they might have projected when they spent that pick on it, but he can still be a consistent, contributor in that role. And I just think they're going to bet on the talent for one more year. It just makes too much sense to me to keep him around.
Roberto's got a good one. He says, Jordan, which tight end would you take in this deep draft? It's a great draft for tight ends. Or would you go after a guy like Hooper? Austin Hooper went to De La Salle. He's a free agent. I think his price tag's a lot less than it used to be. When he was a free agent last go around. Do you think they'll go for Hooper? Do you think, Mercedes Lewis is interesting to me because he's such a great blocker. But then I look at this draft class: Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta. I'm a big Payne Durham fan. Zach Kuntz, Schoonmaker from Michigan's a horse. Wiley from Cincinnati, and there's others. I mean, even beyond that, what do you think? Which tight end to you, based on what you've seen, would you try? Clearly, they're going to add a tight end. Is there one that you really like?
I really like Sam Laporta, but I feel like he's at the point now, just from what I've heard the last week or so, I don't think the Niners will have a chance to get him. I think it makes sense to trade up for an edge guy or a tackle. I don't think they can trade up into the mid-second, early third for a tight end at this point, as much as I believe in him as a player. I do like Durham. He's another guy that caught my eye. Kuntz from Old Dominion, I believe, as well, as a former Penn State guy.
6'8".
Crazy athleticism. But you said Mercedes Lewis, and that's one that's really interesting because one of my favorite players in this draft is Darnell Washington. And
what a catch he made in Indy, huh?
It was incredible. I was about 20 feet away or so when he made that. It was like Spider-Man. He like grabbed it out of the, just stuck to his hand. It was phenomenal. I actually, for anybody who's interested, I know 49ers fans maybe don't have the same interest. Have something coming out on him in the next week or so. He's just a fantastic person, great player. But to me, Mercedes Lewis was that Darnell Washington level prospect. It was a long time ago when he came out. He's 38 now, but he has a lot of those athletic traits, and he doesn't look like a guy who's 38 when you pop on that Packers film. He looks like a guy who could still contribute, and especially when you have the luxury of already being able to put out a guy like George Kittle, he's not going to be tasked with that heavy workload of a tight end one that maybe he would have somewhere else. I know it's been reported the Raiders and Jets have been in on him, but man, you think about Kittle, Mercedes Lewis on the field at the same time and some 22, 21 personnel, like that to me would really, really, that makes a lot of sense. Hooper makes a lot of sense. And I think if you're able to maybe take a guy like Hooper or take a guy like Lewis and bring him in, you can then afford the luxury of drafting a Zach Kuntz, who is coming from a smaller school, is a great athlete, but tight end's the hardest position in the NFL to make the transition from the college level to the pros at. You buy yourself a little bit more time without them having to be a contributor right away from day one. So I really think who they bring in free agency, if anybody, will tell us a lot about what their plan is, because I think bringing in maybe an older guy with a higher floor will allow them to take a guy with a higher ceiling that might take a little bit more time to become a contributor at the next level. And you start looking at guys like Kuntz that would make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I like Payne Durham a lot from Purdue. I watched Purdue a bunch this year, and this guy was all Big Ten as a junior. He was all Big Ten again, and he was an academic all Big Ten player. He's a really smart guy. He's pretty athletic. I mean, this guy's been academic all Big Ten every season. He was team captain in high school. His kid, multi-sport guy. I think he played lacrosse. But I like him. I mean, he's 6'5", 255, got really good hands, plucks the ball with his hands. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dallas Goedert. I don't think he's quite the runner of Goddard, but I like Payne Durham. To me, he would be a steal in the 4th or 5th round if they could get him. I was hoping for Robert Tonyan, but I saw Tonyan left in free agency. Sam Darnold, I did a whole video today how the addition of Sam Darnold is clearly a hedge. And it's either a hedge against Trey's development or a hedge against Brock's health, or maybe it's a double hedge on both of them. But one, do you agree with that? And do you think if you had to say it was one or the other, do you think the Niners are more concerned about Brock's ability to rebound or about Trey's ability to get it and to develop?
I think the 49ers just got to a point where first of all, I do agree with you. Yeah, I think it absolutely is a hedge. And I think that Sam Darnold absolutely has a chance to have a pivotal role on this team. And I think that was something that was communicated to him, because I don't think he would have signed as quickly as he did for the amount of money he did if that wasn't something that was clearly on the table for him. But I think ultimately what happened is, aside from all the other injuries they've had at the position over the years, that NFC Championship game was just devastating. You have this team that's loaded, ready to go now, and you literally didn't have a quarterback that could throw the ball beyond the line of scrimmage at a certain point in that game. And I think they just got to a point where they're like, we can't allow this to happen again. We have to do whatever it takes to make sure that if we have any shortcomings in this coming season, it's not a direct result of us not doing whatever it takes to insulate the quarterback position. And I think having a market with so many guys available who have starting experience certainly helped them out. It kind of was one of those years where that fell into their lap, where they were able to get a guy like Darnold for the price they did. Because I understand he didn't live up to expectations, and a lot of people don't think he's very good. But yeah, I always go back to just that, that Rose Bowl game he played against Penn State when he was coming out, where he flashed so much of this arm talent. He's a very sneaky athlete. He's not a guy that's going to, I don't think they're going to be drawing up design runs for him, but he has the ability to create, get out of the pocket, make throws on the run. And, this is just me speculating. I haven't heard it, and I'm not going to pretend like I've heard it, but I definitely think that was that Sam Darnold was a guy that Kyle really liked in that draft coming out. And I think that the 49ers did a lot of homework on him before they made the move to get Jimmy in the middle of 2017. I think they took a deep look at that 2018 class. We've heard Kyle talk about how much they really like Josh Allen. I think Darnold is another one of those guys, and I think it just got to a point where it was like, hey, we've liked this guy. I get more out of quarterbacks than anybody else. I do more with less than anybody else at the position. Let's bring him in. And realistically, nobody can predict the future, but for whatever my opinion's worth, I think they could win a lot of games with Sam Darnold if they had to. And I think that the alternative of having an unproven, they're not going to find a Brock Purdy in this draft again, right? And I think that they knew that. So, yeah, I agree with you that it's a hedge, but I also think Kyle likes Sam Darnold. And I thought it was even hilarious, just them meeting. I don't know if you saw the video of them meeting in the facility.
No.
He's got that kind of San Clemente, where he came in wearing Vans, the total SoCal, kind of swagger to him. And I'm like, God, him and Kyle are going to be best friends in a month. The vibe you were getting off of it was that, there was something more to it than just, we brought him in to be quarterback 3. And I firmly believe that he has a chance to honestly win the starting job. And people don't want to hear that right now, but I don't think he would be here if that wasn't the case.
That's so interesting. What is going to be the reaction of the fans and the media if we get to week 1, Brock is not ready to play, and he puts Sam Darnold out on the field instead of Trey Lance? Are people going to be cool with that? Because you know what? Kyle knows better than anybody else. Are people going to rain down all kinds of hate because it's going to be kind of the first acknowledgement that this Trey plan is not just kind of going slow. It's not going well. I mean, if Darnold beats out Trey, that's going to be noticed. What do you think the fans' reaction will be? What do you think the media reaction will be? And do you think Shanahan has the guts to actually put Darnold out there in week 1, knowing that would just be inviting all kinds of public criticism, all kinds of second guessing, all kinds of people pointing the finger at him and John? What do you think?
I think the criticism will come, absolutely, and it just really comes down to, like, if they start out 2-1, 3-1 with Sam Darnold and they're winning games and they look good, people will still complain, but those are going to be drowned out by the people that are like, hey, this is work. Like, people just want to win football games at the end of the day. So going into week 1, yeah, it's definitely going to be tough, because I think people are going to look at it as, all right, this is now year 3. You moved all this capital to move up and draft this guy. For whatever reason, you didn't feel comfortable starting him the first year. He played 2 games, a game and a half the second year. And now in the third year, he's got beat out by a guy that most people had written off and don't think is very good. So I think there's going to be outrage regardless. But at the end of the day, Kyle knows Kyle's the one behind the controls, right? Like, he's the one that's called, he's drawn up this offense. He's dialing everything up. If he thinks Sam Darnold's the guy to do it, that's his call to make, but they have to win football games. If they start Sam Darnold week 1 and they get to another slow start, which they've had the last couple of seasons, I think a lot of the criticism is warranted, because you're getting to a point where it's like, if you're not going to be winning football games, you better be getting reps for this guy that you gave all this capital, up to go get in Trey Lance. And I think it just starts raising questions about, there's already this question out there for a lot of people, but then I think it's much more fair to ask the question, did they miss with that pick? And where do you go moving forward? Because I feel like at this point, anything short of Trey Lance starting week 1 is going to invite a ton of speculation that the 49ers whiffed bad on that pick. And I don't think that it's a fair indictment necessarily on Trey Lance, but just for whatever reason, if they can't feel confident putting him out there, he's healthy, Sam Darnold's healthy, and they roll with Sam Darnold, there's a lot of questions Kyle's going to have to answer, and it's only going to get worse if they start losing games early on.
Yeah, it's such an interesting situation, because in a way, they drafted Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. He's already kind of proven that he can play, at least in a short sample size. And that's obviously a huge positive for the 49ers. And if somehow they sign Sam Darnold off the street for the paltry amount that he got, and he somehow becomes a player, that's another huge positive for the team. But you wonder if those two positives would be, would it drown out the miss on Trey Lance if indeed that is a miss, or would the people still be up in arms? Let me ask you this. Are you a Michael Lombardi fan?
I don't follow his stuff too extensively. I do see things occasionally, but I don't have like a strong opinion one way or the other, to be honest.
But who he is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a personnel evaluator, and he's bounced around. He might've been, I think he was with the Raiders. He was with New England, maybe the Niners. He's bounced around. He's now done media, a lot of media. He was on Byard. I heard him with Murph, at least a soundbite that Murph played on the Byard morning show. And he basically said that, he just wasn't he wasn't impressed at all by Trey. I mean, this is the guy that picked, said that they were going for Mac Jones. And then when they did go with Lance, he was like, well, they still wanted Mac Jones. They were just pressured into Lance. But then when he was asked about Lance versus Purdy, he's like, oh, it's a no-doubter. It's a no-brainer. It's like Purdy's done this and this and this. And Lance, and he's just unimpressed. And then I talked to Randy Mueller, who's a former GM in the league. He told me, Jordan, that he wouldn't have even had Trey anywhere on his board because there was too small. It was not enough of a sample size to really evaluate him correctly. So he wouldn't have him on the board, period. So I'm just kind of wondering, I mean, you're not a personnel guy, but you have a personnel interest and you watch a lot of film. Why is it that you think that the NFL personnel community, and maybe this is an incorrect statement, but my sense of it is that the NFL personnel community is not a fan of Trey Lance based on what he's shown in such a small sample size? Why do you think that is? What do you think that the NFL personnel people see that we're not privy to, that maybe Kyle even sees, but isn't willing to share with us? What do you think these guys see in Trey Lance that they really don't like? Do you think there's anything that they've seen that they're just like, you know what? I don't care how much he improves from where he's at right now. He'll never get where he needs to go. It just seems to be a lot of pessimism from the NFL scouting community about Trey and his upside. All right. Maybe that's my sense of it.
I think with the personnel guys too, the biggest difference when you're looking through their lens is like Kyle Shanahan, especially coming off of the recent success they had, just going to the Super Bowl 2 years prior. He had a little bit more wiggle room to move up for a guy like Lance and to buy the time with maybe a project quarterback. And it's going to take some time. And this is going to be, a long-term investment. A lot of GMs don't have that luxury. They can't take a project guy. There's a lot of GMs that would be out of a job right now if they took Trey Lance and going into year 3, this is what had happened. And I think that's where you get from a lot of these personnel guys. They're not in the business of taking risks like that because their jobs depend on it, and they don't have the job security that maybe John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan do. So I think when you're looking at it through that lens, a lot of people don't like Mac Jones, right? Like a lot of 49ers fans don't like Mac Jones. I hear it all the time. But I remember I did my own study for whatever my opinion's worth going to that draft. I thought he made the most sense for the 49ers because it just was like, hey, this is a guy you can plug in from day one. He doesn't have the physical traits that blow you away, but he does a lot of things that I think would translate really well. And it seems like that's where a lot of the personnel people kind of went to, where they're like, hey, this is, just from the guys I've talked to, like, this is the guy that made the most sense. He would have been the starter in that offense. This offense doesn't need that transcendent talent. They just need a guy that can be healthy, that can execute the offense. Mac Jones is a guy who can do that. So I think a lot of them are kind of still on that same pre-draft evaluation, and they really haven't seen enough from Trey Lance to make them feel differently. And then the reps thing is really important too, because one thing I think that gets overlooked, Larry, is that it's not like Trey Lance only had limited experience in college. Like just in general, he doesn't have a ton of experience playing the quarterback position in his entire football playing career, going back to when he was a kid. So that's something where I really think what happened, the 49ers got blown away by just the person, the board work he did, his ability to absorb information, regurgitate it. I'm sure he looked great breaking down coverages, breaking down the stuff that Kyle asked him to do. I remember he mentioned something about how they gave him the install and he was done with it within 24 hours. And it normally takes guys weeks to, get it done and bring it back when they're in that stage of the offseason. So I can't fault the executives who wouldn't have the same luxury that Kyle has, is basically what it comes down to. They're like, I think a lot of these guys look at it and they're like, 90% of the league doesn't have the luxury of going into year 3 and having questions about whether or not the guy you mortgaged 3 first-round picks for is your guy going forward. Most of us would be on the street looking for a new job if we had made the same move, and I think that their opinions reflect that a lot of the time.
Couple last ones before we let you go. What do you think of the pickup of Isaiah Oliver, who's really strong against the run, really strong tackler, had a pretty good year in the slot?
Hey, he's a Pac-12 guy. The Niners are slowly building this all Pac-12 secondary, so I'm exactly all for it. I haven't had a chance to watch him extensively yet. I'll be honest. I lean on Kyle a lot for the Kyle Posey for a lot of the defensive back stuff. And I know he was grinding some film earlier today, and he posted a couple cut-ups where he looked really good when he was asked to defend the run and making some tackles and some plays in the open field. And I think that that's something that really stood out to them. He's a really good athlete coming out of Colorado. He was kind of in that range when the Niners ended up taking Dante Pettis, which feels like forever ago. So he was a guy that probably was on their radar at some point. They probably watched a ton, given the extensive scouting they did of Ahkello Witherspoon back then as well. I think he's a good athlete. And I think when you're looking at the way the NFL is trending and with what these guys are asked to do in space, you have to bank on your own development and ability to coach guys up and take chances on guys who are athletes. So I think having a guy like Samuel Womack, who has a ton of these traits, and pairing him with another guy like Oliver, who has the pedigree and has those traits, you're setting yourself up to, really hit a home run in terms of value, especially when you have a guy like Steve Wilks manning the controls of that defense now. So I like the signing. I think it was very affordable, and I think that he has the inside track to start, but I think it'll be a competition between him and Womack for that starting slot corner spot. And maybe they feel comfortable putting him outside if they need to as well. So I like the signing. I think it was a good move.
Robbie Gould coming back?
He should. I hope so. I think that's something where, nobody likes talking about kickers, but I've written about it a couple times. the absolute worst thing that the 49ers could do is build this Death Star juggernaut lineup, this stacked roster that wins the NFC West. They get into the playoffs again, and then they have a situation. Remember that game where Blair Walsh shanked that, gimme field goal against the Seahawks a few years back? Could you imagine if the 49ers ended up rolling with a rookie or going with kind of an unproven guy to save a few bucks, and they end up having all of this crumble down because they just didn't do what they needed to do to get the kicker who, whether you like him or you don't like him or you think he's too expensive, Robbie Gould doesn't miss field goals in the playoffs. And to me, that you can't put a price on how valuable that is. And again, it's not like he's kicking in a dome. That guy went out there and what was it, like a 43, 44-yarder he kicked in that game in Green Bay. And he literally was turning to the sideline the second he connected with that ball. He knew it was going right down the middle, splitting the uprights. You can't underestimate the value of the kind of confidence it takes to kick like that in a moment like that and literally never miss. So I think they should, Larry. I really hope that they do. But if they don't, there are some veteran guys out there. I just think as much as people like Jake Moody and some of these, college kickers, I always think back to I think it was Aguayo, the dude out of Florida State. You remember he was
Roberto Aguayo, was a second round pick or something like that.
Second round pick, and he was out of the league in like a year and a half. So I think Robbie Gould, you keep him as long as you can. And I think that 49ers fans have gotten used to just having, Phil Dawson was great before Robbie Gould came. So they've had a decade straight of really good, reliable kicking. And it's something that you take for granted until you don't have it anymore. And it would just suck to have that be the thing that makes this all crumble down in the postseason because they didn't, invest in the position. So,
I don't know about you, but, I watched the Niners take Mitch Wishnowsky in the 4th round. I've seen them take kickers and punters high. We've seen Janikowski go in the 1st round. Heck, Ray Guy was a Hall of Famer. He went in the 1st round. I don't know. Jake Bailey, I thought, was one of the best punters I've ever seen when he punted at Stanford. And I think the Patriots grabbed him in the 6th round, but they cut him and now he's somewhere else. I don't know that maybe it's just old school thinking, but man, even the kid from San Diego State who's like the greatest collegiate punter of all time, he had some problems off the field, so that impacted his draft status. But I don't know. I think I'm done taking, never day one. I don't want to ever do a day two. I don't even like to even think kickers until like the second half of day 3. No more 4th round kickers, no more 4th round punters. Go get football players. Go get some. And if you don't have somebody you love, take somebody with a bunch of traits that you love. Go find a kicker afterwards. I'd rather than, what I mean? I mean, that's just my feeling on kickers and punters. It's kind of the way I handle my fantasy team as well. I don't go Harrison Butker in the 10th round. I wait till the thing's over, and I may even not draft a kicker and then just pick one off the waiver wire and stream it every week. You can't do that, but I would almost do that if I was running an NFL team. As far as I don't want to invest draft picks in kickers. I'll invest money in kickers. Like, I agree with you. Robbie Gould doesn't miss in the playoffs. Pay him. He's making 4.8 and the franchise tag's 5.4. Who cares? Pay him the extra $500K. Have the veteran for sure kicker. Steal that money from somewhere else on the roster, but don't invest valuable draft choices in kickers or punters.
So I went down this rabbit hole like a week ago, Larry. I'll send you the article. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I wrote an article literally about the history of drafting kickers in the last 10 years. There's been 17 kickers that have been drafted within the 7 rounds of the NFL draft, not counting undrafted guys, but in the 7 rounds, 17 guys. One guy got a second contract with his team that drafted.
Exactly. You cannot predict this. It's a very difficult position to handicap.
Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. I think it's just a situation where it's funny because I wouldn't spend a 1st round pick to draft a kicker, but if a team like Baltimore was like, hey, you know what, we're in total rebuild, we need assets, I would send a 1 to Baltimore for Justin Tucker because he's proven that he could do it at this level. And I think that there is value in having a kicker that can put a team on his back the way that Tucker has at various points. But I wouldn't do it on a guy coming out of college because no matter how good they look coming out, because again, I always go back to Aguayo. This guy was supposed to be the greatest kicker ever. Had all this hype around him, and he literally was not in the league after, I think it was like a year and a half, 2 years or something like that. So, they got to get Gould back. Eddie Pinheiro is a guy who makes some sense too. If they can't get Gould, just get a veteran guy. Matt Gay would have been great, but he got paid a ton of money by the Colts, which you can't fault them for. Because again, having a good kicker, it's so funny. Like I don't know if you've ever seen. I'm a big Curb Your Enthusiasm guy, so I don't know if you've ever seen the interview.
You kidding me?
Did you see
I
the
love
interview?
Curb Your Jordan, this is why you and I get along. To me, the Curb Your Enthusiasm where he picks up the prostitute so he can drive in the carpool lane. Epic.
Dodgers game. Yeah.
When he calls information and he's trying to look up the name Crazy Eyes Killa. And he's like, it's Kill, maybe AH. It's crazy as Crazee. I mean, it's eyes with a Z. I'm just, and then I met, who's the guy who lives in his backyard in that show?
Leon. Yeah. Leon.
JB Smoove.
Yeah. Oh, he's fantastic.
I met him at a comedy club and just greatest guy. I mean, hilarious.
Did you see him I watched him do stand up. I forget the name of it. It's somewhere in the marina in San Francisco. I watched him do.
I think I saw him at Tommy T's. Maybe I forget. But JB Smoove is just hilarious.
The whole production, it's a one of a kind thing.
I love that show.
It's you can tell a lot about a person based on their opinion of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I've always find I get along great with people who like that show. It's the best.
It blows Seinfeld away too because it can
they have more room. Yeah, they can get away. It's not on cable, so they can get away with more stuff. Yeah,
right. I mean, it's just all of it. I mean, when Larry bumps his head and so his girlfriend no longer wants to sleep with him because she thinks he's like too old and he's like, hey, I'm fine. He walks into that show. I seriously could binge watch every season, or like when he's driving with his wife and Cheryl goes, oh, hi, blankety blank. Larry's here.
Yeah.
Like in the car. And she's like, like don't say anything because Larry's here. And then Susie with her fucking Larry, fucking Larry, you fucking. Yeah. Oh, she has got to be the greatest character of all time.
It's incredible, dude. And so I don't know if you saw, he did interview with Rich Eisen like a year and a half. I think it was the 2021 season. And he went on this not like a rant, but he went on this like very spirited debate about how like the NFL should just completely get rid of kickers and eradicate kicking from the sport of football. And so like, I'm kind of like, I don't have a strong opinion either way about that, to be honest, but I'm like, until you get to that point where you are following the Larry David lead and you are completely eradicating it, you can't ignore the position and you have to invest in guys that are proven and tried and true at the position. So until the NFL does follow Larry David's lead, guys like Robbie Gould deserve the extra $500K, like you said. Guys like Matt Gay deserve the contracts that they got. And it always comes back to, it's something that you're never going to value until you don't have it. And if you're a middling 500 team, whatever, don't pay $6 million to a kicker. But when you're a team that has problems in the red zone in the postseason and you're in the playoffs every year, you need a guy that's going to be nails when that time comes. And to me, like Robbie Gould, you tag him again. If he doesn't want to play there, you tag him, you figure it out, you pay him, you do whatever you need to do to keep the guy happy. Because as long as he's kicking, the 49ers can't justify allowing him to go to a different team without exerting every possible option.
Last one. And dude, we really love you. We had a bunch of people in here who were like, dude, get this guy in the regular. Like they just stumbled into Jordan Elliott. They never it is funny though. You think everybody knows everybody. And then, you wind up popping on somebody's show and they're like, hey, this guy's pretty good. Thanks, man. I've been doing this for 25 fucking years. But you're phenomenal, dude. And we love your stuff. Your content's great. Your work's great. You're awesome. This is a tough question because this is kind of like, I know you're focused on the Niners like I am, and I don't know about you, but I'm aware of like, let's say 20% of the moves, maybe 30% of the moves around the league, but I haven't really gone through and looked who got what and who lost what, and I haven't really done that quite yet. But I just have a sense of it, and I'll throw it to you because you probably have a sense of it as well. As we're sitting here, it was Niners-Eagles. And when the season ended, I looked at the NFC and I said, it's going to be Niners Eagles for the next 5 or 6 years. I don't see anybody who's going to interrupt Niners Eagles in the NFC. And then the closest team I could come up with was like Detroit. As far as they're starting to, you see the storm clouds starting to form, the talent starting to form. Do you see any team outside of the Niners and the Eagles in the NFC where either their signings or their draft capital or their leadership or whatever, do you see any big time challenger for the Niners and Eagles starting to form, or is it literally going to be Niners Eagles for the next 4 or 5 years in the conference?
I think the parity of the NFL won't allow it to sustain that way as much as it looks like that now on paper. Just for whatever reason in this league, it's so hard to have that continuity. It's funny. A team I really like, and I really like their moves, they just don't have a quarterback that I really believe in right now, is Atlanta. I think Atlanta did a really good job addressing some of their needs on defense. I think they have some great up-and-coming younger players. I loved Arnold Ebiketie. I think he's going to be a good edge rusher.
Penn State, yeah.
They got Onyemata, who's a guy I really like. I remember we talked about.
Oh, they did? I didn't know that.
Yeah. They got him. They have Bates. They have Richie Grant. They have A.J. Terrell. Like, that defense looks really good. Grady Jarrett, still a really good player.
Good head coach.
They got Kyle Pitts. They have Drake London. And that's where I'm just like, I can't understand why they're not aggressively going after Lamar Jackson. Because if they landed Lamar Jackson, I think they're right there with the 49ers and Eagles potentially. And then the other team that I'm looking at, and 49ers fans are going to hate to hear it, but I got to say what I'm thinking. It's Seattle. Seattle's in a really good position where if they nail these first-round picks they have this year, and they don't put themselves in a bad spot with bad contracts, they're building something really good over there. And I think their biggest problem, and John Schneider alluded to it a bit at the Combine, was just they didn't have what it took to match the 49ers at the line of scrimmage and really up the middle. But they made some moves I like in free agency. Draymond Jones was a great signing. But, man, if they add like a Will Anderson, if they add somebody, Jalen Carter, the feelings are kind of shifting now, but I still think he's a really good player. He could probably be there at 5. Seattle,
whatever, was it Wilson from Texas Tech?
Yeah, like they're a couple good players away from, and I really liked their draft last year. Boya Mafe, I loved. I would have loved to see him land with the
Minnesota.
49ers. He can end up being really good. Tarek Woolen's incredible player. Seattle is going to give the 49ers a run for their money in the division. I don't know if they're quite at the 49ers level yet, but man, if they have another draft like they had last season, which, it's funny, they had a really good draft in 2011. They hit it absolutely out of the park. And then they had 6 or 7 that were very forgettable. So maybe this is, they're back on that trajectory where they just got really lucky with a ton of picks last year, but Seattle's a team to watch out for. I think they are really on the cusp of being not only a contender for the division, but, if they build up that roster really well, Geno Smith is a good NFL quarterback. And I think that they have weapons on offense. I really like Kenneth Walker. I think he's a great running back.
I do too.
They have stalwarts at the tackle. Abe Lucas. I don't think anybody gave Nick Bosa more problems than what Abe Lucas did in that wild card round game. When I went back and watched that, Bosa didn't have a single pressure in the entire game. It was the only game all year he didn't have a single pressure in, and Abe Lucas, as a rookie, was able to do that. So I know the Lions are kind of the team everybody's watching, and I think Dan Campbell is an easy guy to root for, so I hope it works out for them. But I think it's right in the 49ers' backyard. I think that the Cardinals and the Rams aren't going to be very good for a couple years, and it's going to be kind of like the early 2010s where it's going to be the Niners and Seattle battling it out for that NFC West. And maybe the Niners get a rematch in the conference championship, but this time it's in Santa Clara, and they can avenge that tough game from 10 years ago.
I've been touting John Schneider as a great GM for years, and even like Softy Mahler's like, you're fucking high. I'm like, no, dude, you're nuts, because this guy's good. He got Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant, 2 bookend corners. Then he gets Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas. He got 2 tackles, 2 starting tackles, 2 starting corners, and a starting running back, and some good pieces on defense, all in one draft. Yeah, no, John Schneider knows what he's doing. Slick says Jordan Elliott is a 49er content legend. We got this one from Roberto. He says Jordan is hella sharp. Niner content. Niners Nation is awesome. And then we have one question for Jordan from Eric. He says, Jordan, is that a Vince Young photo from the Rose Bowl behind you?
It is. Yes. I apologize if there's any UFC fans here. Let me get out of the way. Sorry, I don't know if you can see it. It is.
That was a great moment, man. That was a phenomenal moment. That really was.
Yeah, that's I try to. I have a little collection for anybody who hasn't seen. I have my little wall here. That's so some of just the memories. I'm 27, so it's just I try to keep it to things that I actually saw with my own eyes growing up. So I have Mike Vick here, I'm Patrick Willis, Ricky Williams, and then I have a couple funny ones here. This one actually you guys might get a kick out of. It's Antonio Brown when he drop kicked the punter. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But that was what I remember. I'll never forget. I was at, I don't know if you ever went to Knuckles, a sports bar. It used to be at the Hyatt. Yeah.
By the airport? You throw your peanut shells
Knuckles
on the ground.
Yeah, I used to go to Knuckles every Sunday morning. They'd have the big 32-ounce cores you get at 10 a.m. And
The Yard.
Oh, yeah. I remember very vividly watching that play with Antonio Brown. So, yeah, I have a little wall, stuff like that. But, yeah, that Rose Bowl game is probably the best football game I've ever seen in my life, either level of competition. Really, really hard to top the atmosphere, the ending, all that stuff. And, when I was growing up, I was 10 or 11 at the time. USC was everything. And to see Vince Young, kind of topple them, I think he's solidified his place in history with that one game alone.
All right, brother. What do you got? If I read the Niners Nation this week and I look under Jordan Elliott, what's Jordan writing? What are we going to see this week?
So I'm working on a couple. I know you'll really like this one. I'm working on one on Kevin Givens right now because Kevin Givens is a guy who I've really liked the last couple of years. I'm trying to really highlight some of these depth guys because I think that's one area where the 49ers are able to separate themselves from other teams. A team like the Eagles last year, if we're talking front four, top line starters, they probably had the better defensive line, but where the 49ers, I think, are a cut above the rest is their ability to have the second and third wave of pass rushers and defensive linemen that, Kevin Givens could start on a number of teams in the NFL. So I did my Ty McGill one. I'm doing Kevin Givens, and then I'm also doing one on Drake Jackson and why I think the 49ers have so much belief in him. I'll include some cut-ups and some of the flashes he showed last year. And then I'm guessing a week or so out, free agency is kind of going to simmer down, and I'm going to start focusing on a ton of draft stuff where I'll have one-on-one interviews with prospects who I think the 49ers will be looking at and guys who I think make sense for the team. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, about a week out, everything's going to be shifting towards draft stuff, and hopefully we'll all the free agency stuff will be sorted out because it's a lot to keep up with, and it feels like we never really get a break. It's been the off season for 2 months, and it feels like I'm working now more than I was during the season. So we'll see how it goes.
Dude, you kick ass. Keep kicking ass and taking names. You're always welcome on the Krueger Show. We're big fans, big Jordan Elliott fans. Everybody needs to go follow Jordan on Twitter and then catch everything that he puts out on Niners Nation. I got Niners Nation bookmarked, and I probably check it, I would say 5-6 times a day, to be honest, just to see, and I always love when, I love your stuff. I love Kyle's stuff. You guys really, really do a great job. So keep it up, man. Thanks for coming on tonight. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Larry. It's always a pleasure. And thanks for everyone watching. I hope you guys had a good time.
The great Jordan Elliott. He is awesome. Niners Nation. Go check him out, Niners Nation. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle, our title sponsor. Find them at pigandapickle.com. And if you're in Marin County, they're at 341 Corte Madera Town Center, right there in Corte Madera. Open 7 days a week, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. The brisket is amazing. You got to try it. And they also have a killer location if you're like me and you live out in the East Bay. Try them. They're open Wednesday through Sunday in the Emeryville Public Marketplace. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. And here, if you don't believe me, take a look at it for yourself. Welcome back to the Krueger Show. Big thanks to Casey Bateman and the good people at Telmetrics for being a sponsor of the show. You say, what's Telmetrics? It's Telmetrics is a website, TELMETRIX.co. Let's say you hurt your elbow, but you don't want to go to the doctor, urgent care. You're trying, maybe it's not quite that serious and you think you might be able to rehabilitate yourself at home. Well, this is a resource that you can use to do exactly that. Telmetrics.co, TELMETRIX.co. They use computer vision and artificial intelligence, and they provide a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and telehealth environments. And here is a brief word from Telmetrics. And last but certainly not least, special thanks to our sponsor of today's show, New York Style Italian Sausage. Phenomenal product. I love New York Style sausage. It absolutely is great. Often imitated, never equaled. The Italian mild is amazing. The Italian spicy. Check them out online at newyorkstylesausage.com. And here's another word from the owner of New York Style Sausage Company.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York Style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York Style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
All right, coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show on this Friday night. Kid Tricks to Krug, please don't talk about the Warrior game. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about the Warrior game. The Warriors lost tonight, 127-119. Once again, they come out, they don't play any defense in the first quarter. You could make an argument this was a gotta-have-it game. They're coming down the stretch. They may not make the playoffs if they just lose all these road games. They are non-competitive crap on the road. They gave up a 39-point first quarter to the Hawks in Atlanta tonight. And, Golden State did win the second quarter 35-32, but the Hawks won the third quarter 33-30 and wind up winning the game 127-119. Kuminga started. The starting five was Clay and Steph and DiVincenzo, Looney, and Kuminga. Draymond Green didn't play because he was suspended. And I'd love to see the Warriors' record without Draymond Green. They just don't win shit without Draymond. I mean, if he's not in there, they have no shot. No shot at all. And remember that next year, if they decide they want to get rid of him, this team's going to fall apart without him. But, Poole, 4 of 12, wound up with 12 points. Just what can you say? Golden State just gets beat. They get beat inside. Tonight, they actually out-rebounded the Hawks 54-45. So they did a decent job as far as that's concerned. And they actually outscored the Hawks points in the paint, 68-54. But the Hawks beat them in fast break points by 5, 22-17. And Golden State had 17 turnovers, and the Hawks turned that into 21 points off the turnovers. And then, the one thing about Golden State is that they always lose at the 3-point line on the road. They were minus 15 at the 3-point line. The Hawks shot 40% from three. The Warriors shot 27% from three. So that's a bit. Hawks shot 5 more free throws than Golden State. But, overall, you look at, they shot the ball the same from 2 as the Hawks, but the Hawks shot the ball better from 3 and were plus 15 there. And just, Golden State comes out, they dig themselves a hole. When you dig yourself a hole on the road, it's going to take a Herculean effort to go turn that around. And you got to play sharp at the beginning of games. Tonight, it was the Atlanta's bench, Okongwu. I mean, there's no answer for Okongwu. They're throwing him lobs. He had 19 and 7 in 24 minutes. I mean, my God, Okongwu had 19, 7 and 2 blocks and not one turnover in 24 minutes. Griffin, the young player out of Duke, had double digits off the bench. Bogdanovich had 14 off the bench, 25 and 12 for Trey Young. So, I mean, 22 for John Collins, 14 for DeAndre Hunter. Golden State, once again, I mean, it's just, they don't have enough firepower. They don't play good enough defense. They don't rebound well enough on the road. Tonight they did some good things, but they dug themselves a first quarter hole and spent the rest of the game trying to dig themselves out of it. So Golden State's now 36 and 35. They are 7 and 28 on the road. 7 and 28. I mean, and the idea that they're going to be able to flip a switch in the playoffs and right all these wrongs and everything's going to go smoothly, I'll take back my prediction. My prediction was that Golden State was going to make the playoffs. They were going to win in the first round. They were going to suffer an injury, and they were going to bow out quietly in the second round. I don't know if I see that now. I think Golden State's going to lose in the first round. They're not good enough to beat the teams at the top of the conference. They're just not playing well. They're not playing well. There's bad vibes. Kerr's future kind of hanging in the air. Myers' future, we don't know. Draymond's future. They're just too old, too young. I mean, go through the lineup. Kuminga's too young. Curry is in his prime still, but at the very tail end of it. Thompson's a little too old. So who's truly in their prime? Looney, DiVincenzo, Jermichael Green, and that's it. I mean, Rollins is too young. Baldwin's too young. Green's too old. Moody's too young. Poole is just, I don't know about you guys. I can't stand watching Jordan Poole. He's always mugging for calls from the officials. He doesn't get those calls. He doesn't play any defense. He doesn't make anybody else better. He turns the ball over too much. His outside shot comes and goes. I don't know. I think they're going to wind up moving him in the offseason. Not a big Anthony Lamb fan. So tired of hearing people telling me how great Anthony Lamb is. I don't see it. I don't see any link there. Jermichael Green, no longer much of a shooter. So I don't know. I mean, Golden State, do I expect them to circle the wagons and somehow step on the gas and down the stretch? I'd like to think they can, but I don't know. I really don't know. Does anybody really think Golden State's making a run to the title? Is there a Warrior fan out there that really believes that? I don't know. Green Glass Full says, "Sup, Krug? What's up, Green? How are you, man?" Nick says, "It's not the playoffs. Who cares, Larry?" Haha. Well, I hear you. So the Warriors are what? Can you get to the playoffs and just flip the switch? I thought Warriors would take down Kings in the playoffs. I don't know if the Warriors can take down the Kings. Seems like teams like the Kings have more momentum than I thought. Yeah, Kid Trixer said JK was awful tonight. I was watching, to be honest, tonight, I watched with one eye on that and then the other eye on Purdue. How about the Boilermakers going down in the tournament? I'll say this: I thought Purdue got several bad calls, several. It almost feels like the entire arena, including the officials, were rooting against the number one seed. I get it; it's upset city. We love it. We love the upsets, but I don't know. I mean, go back and look at that game. There was, I would say, no less than 6 or 7. I didn't bet it, so don't come at me with, oh, you bet it and you're bitter. No, I'm not. I didn't bet it. I'm not bitter. And I didn't have Purdue winning the NCAA tournament, but I just thought they got a lot of bad calls tonight. And then Edey, the big man, Jesus, how soft is he as far as his hands? You can just knock the ball out of his hands anytime you want. And it's like you got a 7'4" center. I mean, Matt Painter, I got to wonder the wisdom of Matt Painter. You got a 7'4" center. You're taking on the Fairleigh Dickinson Knights. They're the smallest team in all of college basketball by height. You've got a 7'4" guy. He only took like 2 shots in like the last 10 minutes of the game. I mean, that's inexcusable. And I'll say this, watching Purdue down the stretch, nobody wanted any. Nobody wanted to shoot. Only that guy Lawyer was the only guy. Was it Fletcher Lawyer? Fletcher Lawyer, the freshman, 6'4" freshman, was the only guy who wanted to shoot the ball. That guy Gillis, that guy's a bricklayer, man. From the 6'6" junior, who's 230, Mason Gillis. Guy just threw up bricks all night. He was 3 of 10, 1 of 7 from beyond the arc. Purdue looked like they're the number 1 seed. Not a single guy wanted to shoot the ball in the last 5 minutes of the game. Nobody. And every time they threw it to Edey, they had bad angles. They had him doubled, but he just looked like does he not have a go-to move? Thought this guy was the favorite to win the Wooden Award, for crying out loud. So he was disappointing. Get that guy one of those hand strengtheners. I mean, you can just slap the ball out of his hands anytime. He just couldn't hold it at all. So Purdue went home. K-State looked good, I thought, today. I don't know how much you watch K-State. The kid Noel, he looks good, the guard. They beat Montana State 77-65. Marquette looks pretty good. Marquette beat Vermont. They advanced. The Zags advanced. They didn't look particularly sharp, but they did advance 82-70. That game was a 4-point game at halftime. It was 40-36 Zags at the half. I watched Connecticut beat Iona. Iona's bad. I don't know how good Connecticut is, but Connecticut smoked them by 24. But, Iona led at halftime 39-37. And then second half, UConn put a 50 burger on them, beat them 50-24 in the second half. But I didn't think, to me, Iona looked bad. Baylor got a nice win over Santa Barbara, 18 for Flagler in that game. Xavier knocked off Kennesaw State. That's the 3-14 matchup. Miami beat Drake. The 5 beat the 12, but it was close, 63-56. In fact, Drake led 30-25 at halftime in that one. St. Mary's, way to go for St. Mary's. They're moving on. They beat VCU 63-51. I think St. Mary's is going to be a tough out. St. Mary's is good. And they play at kind of a slow tempo, but I like St. Mary's. Florida Atlantic has knocked off Memphis. How about that? In the East Region first round. So Florida Atlantic now gets Fairleigh Dickinson, I believe. 66-65. That's a final. Number 9 Florida Atlantic knocks off number 8 Memphis. Michigan State beat SC by 10, 72-62. That game was tied at halftime. Real good game. SC's got talent. I didn't realize how good SC was. You know what looked good today was Creighton. The kid, is it Kalkbrenner? He is tremendous. That's a good player. And he's a 7'1" junior from Missouri, Ryan Kalkbrenner. And he averaged 15 this year, but in this game for Creighton, he had 31. He looked great. And then, as I told you, Fairleigh Dickinson beat Purdue 63-58. Kentucky escapes Providence 61-53. Toshibwe is, if the Warriors need help on the glass, maybe they ought to draft a big Oscar Toshibwe. He had 25 rebounds in a college game. 25 rebounds. That's like having 40 in an NBA game. I mean, that's just every board. And then Pitt. How about Pittsburgh? A lot of people had Pittsburgh beating Iowa State, and sure enough, they did. Pittsburgh, the 11 seed, knocks off the Cyclones 59-41. So Pittsburgh, pretty good team. They led by 7.5, and then they pulled away in the second half. So Pittsburgh played good defense, really good defense. So I'm enjoying the NCAA tournament. I don't know, it's college basketball is not what it used to be. That's for sure. But it's still fun. It's still fun. And I like the format of the tournament. The NBA is better. The NBA players are way better, but the NCAA tournament format is just it's the simplicity of it, of you win, you move on, you lose, you go home, all the drama, and then it's like if there's a lower seed that's got a lead with like 6 minutes left, the atmosphere just becomes incredible, and you can see the players getting tight. It is the best sporting event in America. When you just think about, we don't know any of these teams, we don't care about these players, we really don't care about these coaches. We don't really have a connection to college basketball, but still, there's something about the tournament that's just a lot of fun. Roberto says, later, Krug, hard to listen to sixth place college basketball talk. I hear you. Anyway, hey, I'd like to thank all of you guys for stopping by on the show tonight. Thanks to Jordan Elliott for stopping by. Thanks to all of our sponsors. And tomorrow's a big youth sports day, so I'll probably do some videos. I may do a live stream if something major happens. But have a great rest of your Friday night. And until next time, thanks for joining the Krug Show. And we should tell you, let's check the where we're at as far as, hit like and subscribe. If you hit like, that just helps the algorithm, helps people find us. If you hit subscribe, of course, you'll be alerted every single time we go live. And right now we have roughly 15,500 subscribers to the channel. 15,482 is what it looks like. 15,482 as far as subscribers. So if you're one of the people still in the chat, 15,495. So we're almost at 15,500. So if you're in the chat and you're one of the 219 people still hanging out and you haven't hit like and subscribe, please do. And you can also become a channel member for $4.99 a month. We appreciate every single one of you. Until next time, we're out.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah, we ain't never fall back.